Good morning and welcome to a discussion on Patel's idea of Indian nationalism. Nationalism has emerged one of the powerful ideology in the post-Second World War period. Besides that also it has got different dimension in different parts of the world. In today's discussion, we shall be describing the whole notion of idealism, nationalism, how it has been conceptualized. We will be taking note of how nationalism has been conceptualized in the Western context. We will be talking about how it has been conceptualized in Indian context. Then at the end, we will be talking about Patel's idea of nationalism. What we will be dealing with in forthcoming 26 or 30 minutes, we will be contextualizing Patel's idea of nationalism within the broader perspective, both in terms of the Western perspective and also perspective of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi and other Indian thinkers. The term nation has used diversely in different parts of the world, and as I told that it has been shifted its meaning and its uses across the time and space. If we look into the origin of this term, it has been used in the Latin as a nunci. It is understood to be born, and it is meant a group of people born in particular place. In the European universities, starting from the late Middle Ages, nations were used to be the student coming from particular region or particular country to England. The French radical writer in the 18th century, they also used nation to be the people belonging to particular part of the country. In the prevailing uses of English language, the term nation is understood either synonymous with the state or inhabitant of a state or of a country. It is also understood a kind of a denoting a group of human beings having a common kind of solidarity. But what is important is that nationalism is not simply a solidarity, it is something beyond. It is a solidarity founded on emotion, solidarity founded on action, it is solidarity founded on love and sacrifice for the country and the countrymen. It is also solidarity of being and becoming, and in the process, identity, in the process, nationalism contributes towards the construction of a collective identity, and it is simultaneously used as a solidarity also against the other. So when we are trying to talk about nationalism, we have to understand that it is not simply we are talking about solidarity or a belonging to a particular part of a country or belonging to a particular nation. It's also talking about a lot of emotional attachment to it, some action attached to it, and also a kind of a desire of being part of that country, and at times we are articulating a sense of we-ness and otherness founded on nationalism. Okay. Let us look into how nationalism has been conceptualized over a period of time by different scholars. As early as 1882, famous writer Ernest Renan, he widely talked about a nation is a soul, a spiritual principle. One is was in possession in common of a rich legacy of memories, the other is present in consent. It is a desire to live together and the desire to continue to invest in the heritage that we have jointly received. Most powerful definition of nationalism and nation has widely come from Anderson. Benedict Anderson. And Anderson widely described nation to be an imagined community. While he is talking about imagined community, he is talking about it is imagined because many members of that country, of that nation will not be able to know throughout their life who are the other members of that nation. It is also imagined in that way, that is, every nation is limited within its sovereign territory. So it is beyond every nation there is another nation. But what he is talking about, when we are talking about the imagined community, that imagined community is formed in terms of certain emotion that inculcates a desire even to die for it, even to live for it, even at time it may so happen that is the willing to die even for the nation. So that kind of imagination is linked to the whole process of construction of nation and nationhood, the way we are talking about. Further, it has been conceptualized by other scholars like Glenner, Hobsbawm and many others. Let us talk these two important scholars, the way they have talked about nation. Glenner widely talked about it's the process of achieving a higher culture over a lower culture. By higher culture, he means a kind of anonymity, a kind of impersonal society. It will coming to a kind of pre-existing folk society, local society. So what we find, by the arousal of nationalism, there is arrival of atomized individual, but simultaneously there is a culture, shared culture. That shared culture keep the people together. So it is a kind of bringing a higher kind of a cultural framework over a localized culture. That localized culture that was founded on folk tradition, and what we find, there has been a kind of folk tradition is always localized in terms of local language, local culture, local ethnicity, local food habits. But when we are talking about nationality, it talks about the sharing, talks about integration, talks about fellow feeling about the others. So those kind of a higher kind of a culture, a wider culture is coming to a localized culture. What Hobsbawm widely talked about, nationalism is developed not on one stage. It is it's a process. It's a process of inculcation. It's a process of development of a sense of being and becoming. What it is talking about, that is, nationalism is essentially imposed from the above. When it is coming imposed from the above, there is an arousal of national consciousness. What is talking about? A national consciousness usually comes among the upper strata of the society, the enlightened group, the leaders, the intellectual. Gradually, those ideals of nationalism, integration penetrated down level, starting from the peasants, the worker, the middle class and others. Gradually it is penetrated. So what it is talking about, a kind of penetration, the layered kind of a penetration in the society, from that of intellectual elite to that of a commoners, then everybody becomes part of a nation. Western scholars have also widely talked about, as nationalism is a process of progression, varieties of nationalism is coming on the earth. Those are maybe sometimes cultural, sometimes civic, sometimes secular, sometimes culture oriented, sometimes liberal, illiberal. So varieties of nationalism is taking. So there is a kind of binaries in the construction of nationalism. That's why they have talked about progressive nationalism and reactionary nationalism. Western nationalism, Eastern nationalism, civic nationalism, cultural nationalism, liberal nationalism, illiberal nationalism. So what we find, by this kind of a description, many of the Western thinkers and the scholars, they tried to describe the supremacy of the Western form of nationalism over the nationalism that is growing and manifesting in other parts of the world. In Indian context, nationalism has been widely talked about by Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore and other thinkers. It is wide that, as I told, when Anderson was talking about nationalism, Anderson was guided by a kind of a limited imagination. Limited imagination in that way, it is talking about a nation that is guided by geographical boundary, that is also guided by in terms of its own sovereignty. So nationalism can't be spread in terms of humanity because every nation is having a kind of a limit in itself. But Mahatma Gandhi was talking about nationalism and an ideology as a force for the liberation of humanity. So in his understanding of nationalism, we find there is the presence of a global phenomenon and universal struggle. So he defined nationalism as a part of universal struggle of humanity for justice and equality. He was against armed nationalism because it was the armed nationalism that was spreading hatred on the earth, also creating enemies out of old friends. So he was against armed nationalism and hatred against anybody in the name of nationalism. In his own word, what would be the nature of Indian nationalism? In his own word, my love therefore of nationalism, or my idea of nationalism, is that my country may become free, that if we need, the whole country may die, so that humanity as a race may survive. There is no room for race hatred here. Let that be our nationalism. So he was widely talking about an universal phenomena, a liberation of humanity by using nationalism as an ideology against all form of oppression in the society. As nationalism was growing, it divided the country in various forms, because it was Western nationalism, Indian nationalism, and boundaries was created among the several nations. So hatred started spreading across the globe. Tagore was widely disturbed this kind of phenomenon and resurgence of nationalism. So he was disturbed by nationalism, and what disturbed him, that is the increasing fragmentation of the world and the growing lust for the economic interest and political power in the name of nationalism. So what he found, nationalism has become a tool. It has become a tool to gain political power. It has become a tool to gain economic power. To him, a nation in the sense of political and economic union of the people is organized for a mechanical purpose. It is an end in itself, and nationalism is the greatest evil of the nation. He also writes that nationalism is a curse on humanity because it does not integrate, it rather divides, it rather brings a kind of hatred of one nation against that of another. So we find that the way nationalism, initially we were talking about solidarity, we were talking about the fellow feeling, as those are limited and circumscribed within the given culture, given territory, the lack of universality that concern most of the Indian thinkers like Mahatma Gandhi and also Rabindranath Tagore. But even within that, Rabindranath Tagore, though he has criticized nationalism and he was against the whole philosophy of nationalism, Gandhi has widely accepted nationalism to be an universalist and universal phenomenon. Nationalism in Indian context has been widely debated and discussed even by the thinkers, those who propagated for what we call cultural nationalism. There has also been talk of secular nationalism in India. Writers like Savarkar, a leader and philosopher like Savarkar, he has located the roots of Indian nationalism on the claim of inherited commonness in Indian society. He talked about that India is a place and there are so many commonalities in Indian societies. Those commonalities are reflected in terms of race. What are that? The racial community in terms of the Aryanness, land from that of the Himalayas to that of a sea. It is a history, that history is from the Vedic period till death. It's having a common language, that is the Sanskrit. It's also having the common others. So what it talks about, defining Indian language, nationalism in terms of certain inherited commonness. When you are talking about nationalism, we are also encountering various other kind of phenomenon that is widely described when you described nationalism. I say ethnicity is one. When you talk about ethnicity, we talk about an amount of inherited character and inherited collectivity founded on certain primordial and inherited elements. That may be the language, that may be the religion, that may be race, varieties of other things. But author usually make a distinction between the ethnicity and nationality. Ethnicity may provide the basis of nationality and amount of emotion that may lead to formation of a nationality, but nationality is having some other kind of a characters, because a nationality is linked to the formation of a state. So what we talk about in terms of a formation of nation state. So ethnicity may form the basis of a nation. When an ethnicity acquires the legitimate right to govern a particular state, it becomes a nationality. And it is through the emotion that integrate an ethnic group and differentiate itself from that of other. So in Indian context, we find there is a kind of multi-ethnicity, multicultural, multilingual and multi-religious group. So in that case, what it is talked about in Indian nationalism, it is a manifestation of a plural society, and here the nationalism is founded on a kind of a secular basis that integrate all varieties of the religion, language and racial group in a common platform. So those kind of a variation in terms of language, religion and ethnicity, when the whole ideology of nationalism came, it became a normalization project, a kind of integrating project of India in the name of Indian nationalism. At this point, the fundamental question is whether or not there should be a demarcation between the state and religion, whether the Indian nationalism should be founded on religious majoritarian state or it should be founded on a religious pluralism, social pluralism or a cultural pluralism. As I told, when we talk about ethnicity, we talk about a multi-ethnicity, multi-ethnic country. So the question has remained what kind of foundation the Indian state should have and what kind of foundation Indian nationalism should have. Mahatma Gandhi, the founder, the father of Indian nation, he wrote very forcefully, the free nation, that is free India, will not be a Hindu Raj. It will be an Indian Raj based on the majority, based not on the majority of any religion, sect or community, but on the representative of the whole people without distinction between religion. They would be elected for their record on the service and merit. Religion is a personal matter. It have no place in politics. That is Mahatma Gandhi wrote in 1947. He further wrote, I do not expect India of my dream to develop one religion that is to be wholly a Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim, but I want it to be wholly tolerant with its religious working side by side, one religion working side by side to that of another. The state has nothing to do with religion. The state should look after the secular welfare and not my religion or not anybody's religion. That is everybody's religion to him is everybody's personal affair. Gandhi advocated not for religious division in the society, but for the coexistence of multi-religious, multicultural entities in India. So what Mahatma Gandhi is widely talking about, when we are talking about Indian nationalism, that nationalism is founded on multi-ethnicity, multiculture, multi-religious orientation. At this point, let us talk about how Patel, the Iron Man of India, he conceptualized his idea of nationalism and also operationalized his ideals of nationalism in Indian context. Patel's position on the question of nationalism and its definition and significance emerged from the same moral and ethical value system of that of Gokhale, Tilak, Mahatma Gandhi and also Nehru. To him, nationalism was rooted in the anti-colonial movement against the British and defined by virtue of humanitarianism, secularism, democracy, peaceful coexistence, civil liberty for all, and social justice for all. He criticized the narrow exposition of the concept of nation and nationalism and placed citizenship above religion, ethnic and caste identities. Patel further elaborated that India was a land of varieties of religion, cultural tradition, habits and language, yet throughout the history it had evolved a synthesis, a harmony and oneness which had been the admiration of the world and the secret of its preservation. What he is talking about, the way Mahatma Gandhi widely talked about a kind of a multicultural society, a multi-religious society, a multi-ethnic society, Patel has also founded his philosophy of Indian nationalism within the same tradition. He strongly reacted to any view which encouraged particularistic variety of nationalism based on ideology, community or cultural group. So he was away from those kind of a sectarian kind of formation, sectarian kind of ideology that defined Indian nationalism in terms of community or cultural group. He regarded the emergence of Indian nationalism as a product of composite phenomenon which emerged over a period of time by intermeshing of several traditions. It is not one tradition, it is a part of varieties of the tradition that has formed the mosaic of Indian nationalism. He was never in favor of creation of a weak state or a loose center or any such arrangement of dividing India into religious groups, nor could afford to dilute nationalism to the extent of endangering the future safety and well-being of the country. So he was always in favor of a strong center, not a weak center, a strong center that will provide the basis of a strong India and strong nationalism, and that will not be fragmented in the name of religious or cultural privileging of one group by another. He emphasized that neither could the country become a theocratic nation like Pakistan, nor nationalism could be rooted in a particular communal ideology. So he has taken the lesson of division of the country, and he has seen that how Pakistan has emerged as a theocratic state. He was guarding India, that India should not be a theocratic state. India should have is having a syncretic tradition, a multicultural tradition. So Indian nationalism should be founded on multiculturalism. That was one of his biggest assertion throughout his writing and his action. He was of the view that the boundaries of the various states, that was one of his concern, how those are to be demarcated. He was very clear that because India is a multicultural country, is a multilinguistic country, multi-religious country, but he was not in favor of dividing that boundary in terms of religious formation or other kind of a formation. What he is talking about, he was of the view that the adjustment of boundaries and of other regions and handling over the provinces of Bengal, Punjab and much less of Assam could not be on communal line but on the national and linguistic line to adjust the provincial boundaries. So if the provincial boundaries are to be formed, it is not to be in terms of religion, it is in terms of language, the language of the people, they speak in a particular language. According to Sardar Patel, nationalism should be an all-encompassing value in which there should be no opportunity for the privileged classes to exploit the masses. Many of the time, it is the privileged classes, they exploit the common mass in name of religion. So he was saying that is there should not be any opportunity of the privileged classes, they should exploit the masses. Patel's nationalism was founded on the concept of socio-economic and political vision of the movement which would be realized by achieving a Swaraj or establishing a democratic, civil, liberal welfare state based on social, economic and political equality for the other. So it is mostly he was speaking in the name, in the line of Mahatma Gandhi, that is, it is a Gram Swaraj, it is a Desh Swaraj. The Swaraj he was talking about, that will be founded, Swarajya he was talking about, that will be founded on the practice of democratic principle, civil liberty for everybody, and a vision of a welfare state with the social, economic and political equality for the all. And for him, Swarajya could not be real for the masses unless a democracy is extended from political to the social and economic sphere. So it will not be a political nationalism. What he was talking about, people should also enjoy social and economic liberty, social and economic democracy within this Indian nationalism. That is, he is talking about the Swarajya. In his concept of nationalism, there would be no opportunity for the peopleless classes to exploit the bulk of the common mass of the common people. For him, the gross inequalities or the weakness of the nation, the gross inequality that is prevalent in the society, that is the most weakness of the nation, and that is to be addressed. To him, the definition of nationalism be outlined, and it is the edifice on which free India to be built in. So equality is one of the concern. Exploitation of the common mass by the elite and the privileged class was another concern. Another concern was that sharing of democratic and the economic rights by most of the people. And for him, a free India will be built where there is no distinction of caste, creed and religion and the classes, resulting in the domination of one section by another. No community should think that its interest is different from that of other, because every community should feel in terms of a common identity, common interest, that is the national interest. So interest of caste, interest of religion, interest of language should not prevail over what is it is the national interest or Indian nationalism. Patel criticized the communal interpretation of the notion of nation and nationalism. He was critical, as I told, of the two-nation theory. He rejected the view that Muslim culture and tradition were not akin to that of a Hindus and they were a separate nation. Patel reiterated that in his pieces that despite partition, majority of the Muslims still live in India with shared history, memories and culture. According to him, how could one obliterate the fact that since ages their ancestors had been buried in this land, and one might partition the land, but one can't partition the river, the forest and the memories and the history. So what he is talking about, a thing which we have inherited. We inherited the common history, we inherited the common nature, we inherited the common forest. So what is important that we should nurture along with the nurturing of our nationalism. Now, very categorically we are to speak that Patel's vision of nationalism was enshrined in the Gandhian vision of a parliamentary Swarajya based on the Panchayati system. According to Patel, it would be a nationalism representing the sovereignty of the people based on pure moral authority, non-violence and satyagraha. The tool with which such system would be perpetuated were the concept of Panchayati Raj, the trusteeship, the charka, the village industries, the basic education, removal of untouchability, communal harmony, prohibition and organization of labor as Mazdur Mahajan. So what he is talking about, formation of a egalitarian society. On 2nd January 1949 in Delhi he wrote, in free India there would be no distinction between caste, creed or religion or classes, resulting in the domination of one section over the other. There may be rich or poor, there may be happy and unhappy, but there would be no difference of stature between one citizen to that of other. He was clear that Swarajya and the emergence of India as a modern nation would not mean removal of white Sahab replaced by the black Sahab, but it would mean an establishment of Majur Raj, or a Raj of the farmers, reviving the spinning wheel and the village industries and preparation of khadi and khadi in every home to help the striving millions. His emphasis was on the will of the people. When he was talking about Indian nationalism, it was not simply a slogan or an ideology that can be implemented for the common man. He was speaking on the choice before what is the choice before the Congress leaders. Speaking on the choice before the Congress leaders between Gandhian vision and independent India and the Western notion of the state, he elucidated that in free India there should be complete peace, freedom from crime and coercion of any kind. All of us should try to achieve that consummation. But undoubtedly, we cannot reach to that goal overnight. The alternative is a firm government backed by a strong army, a strong navy, and a strong air force, and a strong police, but ultimately it is to be governed by the will of the people. So what he is talking about, ultimately the foundation of Indian nationalism should be the foundation of common man's will, where everybody will get a sense of equality and sense of fraternity and solidarity within the Indian nationalism. Thank you very much for being with this talk. Thank you.